Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session on how to use NotebookLM for your research and reporting. Joining us here today, we have Jeremy Caplan from CUNY's Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. We are really excited to have you all here, and we're really excited to have you here, Jeremy. And as you know, I'll get going with the introductions and housekeeping stuff as we're waiting for people to trickle in. But yeah, as we're waiting for the rest of people to join the session today, it would be really great if you all could write some information about yourselves in the chat, writing your name, a bit about where you're coming from, um, any questions you have, where you're working, any information about your beat, and what brought you to this session. And we'll get started with the meat of this session in a couple of minutes. But I'm Elizabeth Clemens. I'm the Director of Training and Enablement here at Muckrock. And with that in mind, if you have any specific workshop topics that you'd really love some training on, don't hesitate to reach out to me so we can get something that you're really interested in on the schedule. We have three different training or free training series for our community. And we also have custom series and we also have office hours available to our community. So I'll drop a link in our chat of all of the different trainings that we have available for you all. And so that you all can explore those and potentially join some of our other training sessions. But today, as I mentioned, we're joined by Jeremy Caplan to talk all about NotebookLM. And in a couple of moments, I'll pass it over to him to introduce himself a bit more and get going with the workshop today. And if you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll stop for questions throughout the session today and then also have some time at the end. And so, yeah, feel free to drop the questions there and I'll flag Jeremy with different questions. As a reminder, this session's being recorded, so if you have to jump early, don't worry, you'll be able to catch the recording if so you won't miss anything. And that'll be uploaded to YouTube. And I'll be sending out an email after the session, including the link to that YouTube recording, and some follow-up questions and my contact information and Jeremy's contact information as well. But yeah, just keep an eye out for that email, and I'll just pass it over to Jeremy.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. I appreciate your intro. I'm so excited to be here with everyone. I am excited to talk about NotebookLM because I think this is the number one most useful tool for journalists right now, most useful AI tool specifically. And it's incredibly powerful and it's different a little bit from some of the other AI tools that are out there. I saw from the pre-registration poll that many of you have never used it before. Some of you have used it a little bit, and a handful of you have used it quite a lot. So as a quick starter, I'd love for you to jump in the chat and just share one quick response. If you have never used it before, or if you are just someone who explored it a little bit, share one thing you'd like to be able to do with it, or a question you have about it, or a purpose you have in being here in terms of learning it. Like, what's the motivation for you? Why do you want to learn it? What problem are you hoping it will help you solve or address? And then for those of you who have used it quite a lot or have used it for professional work in some way, give us one quick summary phrase or sentence about what you've used it for or how you've found it useful. So again, those two things, if you haven't used it much or you'd like to use it more in new ways, what's one thing you'd like to be able to do with it, or one problem you envision it potentially being useful for? If you don't know at all, that's okay too. I'll show you a lot about it as we go. And then if you have used it before, what's one thing you've found it useful for? What's one reason why you used it? Just so we have a little bit of shared context in the room as we get going here. And thanks to those of you who are sharing a little bit of context. It helps everyone, I think, to see who else is here in the room. And we have all sorts of different experience in terms of the subjects that we're interested in, the places we're coming from, the expertise we have, and it's useful just to give everyone a sense of that. And along the way, as we progress, feel free to drop in examples, corrections, notes about your own experience, or additional follow-ups on anything that I've said or anything I haven't said. That will be useful to one another as we progress here. I see a couple people mentioning specific use cases or purposes, gradually accumulating documents on a storyline or beat, and then using it to identify trends, themes, important upcoming dates. Useful to isolate key points in long documents. Those are great examples of use cases. And this person wants to see if it can help in bigger, complex stories. So lots of different purposes for this tool, existing use cases, a question about whether it's more secure or private than ChatGPT and Claude, and we'll get into some of that as we progress. And keep diving into the chat. I'm going to progress with a quick overview first of what it actually is. For those who are really new to it or still new to it, I'm going to give you a quick framework for what actually NotebookLM is and how it works. Then I'm going to jump into some examples of how others are using it, professional news organizations and others are using it. And then I'm going to show you a couple of actual live notebooks so we can see how it works in practice. I'm going to show you some tips and tactics for using it effectively and thoughtfully and creatively. I'm going to mention a couple of limitations that it has, a couple alternatives you can consider being aware of, and then I will share a link to a resource so you can explore it on your own some more and dig into some of the resources that I'll mention along the way. And in that last part, we'll also have time for Q&A and discussion and questions. And that's the plan. So let's dive forward. So this is me. I'm not going to tell you a lot about myself, except to say that I'm a journalist. I'm an educator. I'm passionate about finding tools that allow me to open up time for being human with my family, with my students, with my work. So I don't see this as something that is replacing me. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I think it's something that enables me to be more human because it helps me manage some of the technical, bureaucratic details, time-consuming kinds of little tic-tac things that I can now outsource to a machine or have a machine augment or assist me with. And then that allows me to be more human. And if I had had these tools when I was at Time Magazine, I would have loved that because it would have allowed me to do much more impactful work, more effective work, et cetera. I teach at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, the Newmark Graduate School of Journalism here in New York City, and help entrepreneurial journalists around the world and are working solo, as well as those who are working in small newsrooms, as well as those who are working in big newsrooms, but have a lot to do at the same time. These kinds of tools like NotebookLM can be particularly valuable and useful, and that's what I want to kind of show you how to do. On the side, I have a newsletter called Wonder Tools where I write about this stuff. I wrote a guide to NotebookLM, which hopefully can supplement this for those of you who want to see more of those examples and links and resources, and I'll share that as we progress. And it's in the handout. Okay, so NotebookLM, first and primary use case is as a notebook with an AI layer on top of it. So we're all familiar with notebooks. We have lots of paper notebooks. We have digital notebooks. NotebookLM at its most basic is a notebook that allows you to gather files of various different kinds, and I'll show you what kinds in a moment, and add a layer of AI to basically understand what's in there and make more effective use of it. So that's what NotebookLM is basically. It's other chat services in the sense that it's not just a search engine. It's not just a blank box. It's actually structured in a way to make it more useful, and I'll share more about what I mean by that as we progress. But at its core, this is the most basic purpose for NotebookLM. It has a few distinctions that are really important. One is that it's grounded. So unlike other services that are going to draw on the training model that they have, the training data set, or are going to search on the web and find other ancillary information when you prompt, with NotebookLM, it's grounded specifically in the sources that you give it. So it's only going to find stuff that's in the actual sources that you have, and it's going to cite those sources. So for journalists and educators and anyone else who's concerned about facts and verification, this is super valuable and super helpful. And part of that is the origin. It was created by Stephen Johnson, originally dreamed up by a guy named Stephen Johnson, who you may know is a wonderful nonfiction journalist, written now 14 books on all sorts of subjects. And he used this essentially initially to basically find stuff in all of that massive material that he had developed over the years, all of those interviews, all of those book notes and drafts and chapters. And now he can use that, and that was the origin for this, he can use that to basically identify, find patterns, find themes, find key moments that are connected to an idea he's working on in his new book. So it comes from a journalistic place, which again makes it different from many of the other AI tools, which don't necessarily come from that particular origin or aren't designed for those kinds of use cases. It also has a secondary element, though, beyond the querying, beyond the organizing of materials and the querying of materials. It also has this element where you can produce multimedia content, explanatory content. There's 9 different kinds of outputs now that you can create, which we'll get into in a little bit, which make it really powerful for generating internal materials. So just for you to understand what's actually in there with a data table, for example, or with a mind map, or with a text report that summarizes a particular aspect of your materials, or externally. In some cases, we may want to create an infographic to share on social, or we may want to create a short audio overview for those folks who aren't able to see the content or who want to consume it in a different way. So, or that can also be for ourselves internally. Those materials can be internal or external. And there are all sorts of new ways that NotebookLM is now expanding and growing. I saw recently that somebody mentioned that its search density has overtaken Gemini searching. It's become a really, really popular part of the sort of Gemini ecosystem. And as such, a lot of new tools are emerging. And one of them, for example, that I've found very useful is this YouTube to NotebookLM Chrome extension. So when we get into the way content into NotebookLM, we can now grab an entire YouTube playlist, grab an entire YouTube channel or a YouTube search query, and pull all those videos into a notebook. So that enables us to basically populate notebooks with all sorts of new material that might be relevant to our reporting or our research. With one click for free. And if I didn't mention it earlier, NotebookLM is completely free. There's no cost to use it. There is a premium version if you have Gemini Pro, but for most of us, the initial version, the free version, is actually sufficient for much of the work we will reference today. You can upload up to 50 different sources, and these sources can be anything from a PDF to a Google Doc to a video or audio file. The audio files and video files and other materials can be up to 200 megabytes in size, which is actually much bigger than most other AI tools allow. The documents can be Google Docs, Word docs, etc., PDFs. These can be up to 500,000 words, which is the size of a whole bunch of nonfiction books. And that's in each individual source, and you can have 50 sources in one notebook. And in your free account, you can have 100 different notebooks. So you can create a notebook for each reporting project or for different aspects of your job. You can create reporting notebooks, as many as you want, that it can be as small as having one document in it or having, as I said, up to 50. If you have the paid account, you can have 300 sources in a notebook, and that's a Gemini Pro account, which is about $20 a month. So that allows you up to 300 sources in a notebook, which is really, really powerful. You can drop in links or batch of links. Pretty much any kind of material you can imagine, you can add to a notebook. And even spreadsheets now, that's one of the newer things. So spreadsheets allow you to now have data analysis. If you have metrics or analytics, for example, or if you have other reporting data that is something you're looking into, you can actually bring that into NotebookLM, and then you can visualize it in different ways or just query it in different ways. So it's quite a versatile tool. I had a group of students who had done some interviews, and they used it simply for the transcription. And then in analyzing what are the people, these man on the street kind of interviews they were doing, they just brought in the audio files and got some patterns. What are some things people were talking about? They got the transcriptions, so you can use it even just for transcription capability. That query panel, which is the second area. So the first area is the sources, right? That's where you upload everything. The second area of NotebookLM is the Explore, what I call the Explore tab or the Query tab. This is where you can start putting in queries. You can ask questions. These are kind of like prompts in ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. And the great thing is that you're going to get citations. I'll show you examples when we get into the demo. And these citations allow you to go back to the original source of that material. So if you're looking for the section where the reports, the government reports talk about a particular issue, you can get directed back to that specific place. You can also identify connections between disparate documents. If you have a whole bunch of different court documents, for example, you can find out all of the places in those documents where there's a discussion of environmental impact, for example, so that you can track down and go back to the original documents to find that material more easily. Unlike kind of Command F searching or Control F searching, where you're just looking for keywords, here you can also look for kind of more abstract concepts, natural language concepts. So if there's original handwritten documents, right, which it can look at, or any kind of documents where there's language with different emotions that are evident in the language, you could say where are the passages in these different documents, these transcripts of these meetings where people are really angry and expressing their anger or having arguments, right? That's not the kind of search you could do with a Command F in a PDF, right? Which is just looking for a particular keyword. So the third panel, we've talked about the source panel, right, which is where you upload all the material. Second panel being the query panel, where you prompt and ask for things, ask questions, look for things. The third panel is the studio panel, which is where you create different kinds of artifacts, slide decks, infographics, mind maps, reports, video overviews, audio overviews, and now data tables as well. There are two others that are a little bit less relevant for us as journalists, typically, which are flashcards and quizzes. Those are mainly oriented around students or kind of learning something. But if you are kind of trying to, prepare for something, or you're trying to learn your subject a little bit better, there might be cases where those flashcards could be helpful. But those 9 different types of studio creations are basically, usable in so many different ways because you can customize the way they're created. So you can ask for a particular kind of infographic based on a particular subset of documents or for a particular explanatory purpose, and you can really guide what's created really, really effectively. You can even guide the style of creation. You can say you want it in papercraft style, or you can say, I like using sketchnote visual style, for example, sometimes. So you can even guide the specific type of presentation. You can ask for clean, large typography that matches a particular style you have in mind. So there's a lot of flexibility and power you have. Another way you can guide those, for example, is when you're creating a data table, you can ask for it to compare or to list specific kinds of data. So for example, I'll show you a notebook shortly that I created about the congestion pricing controversy or discussion in New York City. New York City being one of the first cities in North America to have a congestion pricing citywide plan. So I wanted a comparison table of all the different cities, or many of the major cities, that have congestion pricing plans. And I'll show you the data table that was outputted in that way, according to what specific topics I wanted to have in that data table. So that's an example of something you can use for your own usage, or maybe in the realm of transparency journalism, you can share that with your audience too and your readership if that's relevant. So this can be used internally for data and analytics and strategy kind of planning and thinking for internal kind of analysis. You can use it for investigative material, right? You have large numbers of reports and you want to just basically kind of get a handle internally on like what's in these documents and where things are, so you can go back and focus your time and read those more efficiently. I worked with Don Bartlett and Jim Steele when I was at Time Magazine, the great investigative team. I was just a junior reporter in those days, and they had stacks of documents up to the ceiling, practically, of their office, and huge file cabinets full of stuff. And I would try to go through those to find key documents we were looking for, they were looking for, really. And it would take hours, manual, searching, just really, really tough. And now we can do that much, much more efficiently. One other key difference I just want to reemphasize is that, this is grounded material. So when you're doing a query in NotebookLM, it's not looking out onto the internet. It's not kind of coming up with something to please you. It's grounded using a kind of RAG system, a retrieval augmented generation system. So it's looking at the specific sources. And I just want to reiterate how important that is when we're kind of trying to ensure that our analysis is focused on the actual documents we're looking at and not sort of picking something out of thin air. And again, this is your guidance, right? First touch is human, last touch is human. The first touch is you putting stuff in there. And you can put one thing in there, you can put 50 things in there, you can put whatever you want to put in there to guide the orientation of the system. And then it's doing something in the middle. It's the engine, you're the pilot, right? It's doing something in the middle. And then you, as the last touch human, are deciding, okay, here's what I'm going to now do with this analysis or do with this information. And you can use it purely for internal usage. You can use it for supplementing some sort of resource you're providing to readers. It's not for everything. Obviously we can use ChatGPT and Claude for other purposes, Gemini for other purposes when we want to access material from the entire internet or from a broader corpus. We just also want to use this when we need that kind of grounding, which is really valuable. And we want those citations so that we can see where exactly is this information coming from? Where is it producing this? How is it producing this response? And for data of various kinds, including spreadsheets, which can be overwhelming, this can be really helpful. We want to ask it to do the extraction, the pulling out of the information. We don't always want it to do all of the analysis. So it's not necessarily replacing all of our human analysis, but it is helping us get to that place where we can do the analysis efficiently more quickly. I want to pause now and switch gears into some demoing. Before I do that, though, I want to take a quick moment for questions that have come up, clarifications, something I've said thus far that you want to add to or clarify or ask about. If you have a question, you can put your digital hand up or you can drop in the chat and just be as concise as possible if you have a quick question or a clarification. And I'll open up another opportunity toward the end if we want to get into bigger picture questions. I'm dropping in the chat also the complete guide, this WonderTools piece that I wrote, if you want to have that for reference with some additional examples. Does NotebookLM upload your work to its own brain? Does it train on what you provide it? So the way Gemini works is that it operates in different, as you probably know, different layers of privacy depending on which contract you have with Google, right? So the New York Times uses NotebookLM. It's one of the few, and anyone here from the Times, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding from the AI team. It's one of the few kind of AI services that they use, and that's because they have a contract with Gemini, with Google, that allows them to use it privately and securely, and the information doesn't get used for any training purposes of any model. It's private and secure. If you're using the free version and you have no kind of corporate or enterprise contract, you're going to be subject to the general terms of any kind of general usage of Gemini, which could, in some cases, allow them to use some of that material for training. So you want to make sure that you're on an enterprise contract if you're using it for highly secure material. When I say it's grounded, what I mean is that it's only looking at the material that you upload. So if you ask ChatGPT or Claude or some other service like Gemini a question, it's going to look at the internet, it's going to look at all sorts of other material. It's not grounded just in the material you've given it. By contrast, if you use NotebookLM, it's only going to be looking at the material you've uploaded. So if you don't have material that's relevant, it's going to basically say, I don't have information to answer that. That's what we mean by grounded. So does the lowest Gemini paid level give you full privacy? I don't want to speak in too much detail about this because there's a lot of legalese in the Google privacy terms. You actually want to be on a workspace enterprise contract if you want the full kind of guarantee of absolute privacy and security, which requires the Google Workspace account. But Google lays that out very clearly and in detail in their privacy pages. Were my slides produced in NotebookLM? Good question. Some were and some weren't. If you want me to get into more detail, I can. I'll actually show you the notebook I created about NotebookLM. So I can show you that. Okay, I'm going to dive forward because I recognize we have limited time and I want to make sure we get to as much as possible. And I also want to give you the opportunity to do a little hands-on if we have a few minutes in the latter half. So with that in mind, I'm jumping into my actual NotebookLM now. So I'm going to show you my NotebookLM now. And now you're seeing behind the scenes. This is my NotebookLM. And the first thing I'm going to show you is featured notebooks. So NotebookLM allows you to have public notebooks. So you can see here that The Economist has a public notebook, and Die Zeit in Germany has a public notebook with 40 different sources. In The Economist case, this one has 27 sources. Um, there are other professional kind of journalism outlets. This one is actually a really interesting one from The Economist, looking at the world ahead in 2026. And there's a great one, which is, oh, here's a good one from The Atlantic, How to Build a Life, which is based on a series of columns from The Atlantic. And there's a whole bunch of other examples of these public ones. This one is one that I find super valuable, Our World in Data. It's a great data organization. And they have uploaded a whole bunch of really great sources on data, from everything from clean water, information about clean water around the world, to, if we go back to the sources, to economic inequality by gender, famines, food insecurity around the world. And basically, you can look through and sort of query any of that data about any topic that's of interest to you. Where in the world is poverty diminishing? Where are the countries where this is less of an issue than it has been in the past? And on the right side of this, you'll see different examples of visual generations, right? These are infographics, for example. Here's an infographic generated from this notebook. And there are so many other things that you can generate here. There's audio overviews, video overviews. Here's an example of a video overview.
Story with the world today. It's kind of complicated, isn't it? We see incredible progress, but at the same time, there are these massive problems staring us in the face. In this explainer, we're going to use data to try and make sense of it all. We'll look at how things are genuinely better in lots of ways, still pretty awful in others, but also, and this is key, definitely improvable. Okay, let's just start with a hard truth. Something genuinely awful. Every single minute, around 10 children under the age of 5 die somewhere in the world. Unprecedented and fine struggle. Let's first dig into where things are still deeply, deeply challenging.
So this is a video overview, an example of a video overview, which is kind of the next generation after the original audio overviews, which went viral. That's what actually originally made NotebookLM go viral, was the audio overviews, which you can also hear here as an example of that. Well, let me actually show you that in another notebook. So that's an example of a public notebook. Lots of other examples you can see here. Anyone can explore these, and you can get a taste for how others are using that. There also are notebooks that are shared with you. So I can share a notebook with someone else. Here's an example of one that's useful. This is a notebook from the International Journalism Festival that I just attended in Perugia, Italy. Fantastic conference, probably the best journalism conference I've ever attended, which was really, really phenomenal. And this is a notebook that allows you to see, they put all their videos online. And so this allows you to basically look at any of the videos, but also to query anything that happened there, and get an analysis of anything that happened at this conference. As an example.
Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, and finding that 75% of the foot traffic to your business has just vanished.
So this is an audio overview discussion
hasn't slowly
about the conference,
anything like that,
drawing on all of the panels.
Because, well, someone fundamentally changed the structure of the city's roads.
Which is a terrifying thought for any business owner.
Absolutely. But the thing is, for publishers and newsrooms across the globe in 2026, this isn't some dystopian hypothetical. According to the overwhelming consensus at the International Journalism Festival in Perugia, this is the new baseline reality. The whole crawl, rank, click era of the internet is officially dead.
Okay, this is actually a really interesting discussion with two AI characters that sound very human, right? In case if you've never heard those are AI characters, right? I've played these for people in the past who aren't familiar with NotebookLM, and they had no idea that those were AI voices. I'm assuming this group is very savvy and you knew those were AI voices, but they are so human-like that it's remarkable. And by the way, Google had pairs of people in many different languages spend hundreds of hours in conversation to train, not just in English, but in many languages, the nuanced kind of back and forth conversation. which is really powerful. That's an example of a different kind of use case, right? Just gathering material from a conference. I want to show you a couple of specific ones that I've used to illustrate how I think it can be useful in a reporting context. So this is a notebook I put together about the politics and impact of urban congestion pricing, which I alluded to earlier, for New York City. And just to reiterate the setup here, on the left side of the screen is the source panel, right? I'm just enlarging that now so you can see all the different kinds of sources here. There are a lot of different sources. I have a Gemini Pro account, so I can have more than 50 sources, but 50 is plenty. And you'll notice checkboxes. So anytime I want to just focus my analysis on a particular document, right? So here, for example, is a report about comparing the London and Stockholm congestion pricing plan, right? So let's say I want to just look at that particular one and maybe a few others that are doing comparisons of different. I can just select some subset of sources and query those, or I can query them all. So you can choose and basically direct the engine to query whichever sources you want. And this is something that's really a pretty new feature, which is really valuable. If you don't have sources on a subject, you're just getting going, you can also use the Gemini search capability to bring in new sources. So I can do either fast research or deep research and gather high quality sources. In this case, it is pulling from the web because I'm doing a different function, right? In this case, I'm actively searching for new material to populate this notebook. And I could do that in a separate window and then download them and upload them, but this just allows you to more quickly get particular documents in here. So if I wanted to say, let's say Tokyo announces a new congestion pricing plan, and I want to get some new documents in here into this notebook based on Tokyo's new plan, I could do either a quick research query or a deep research query to gather that information. Or if I have material in my drive, I could say pull material from my drive for my own notes about Tokyo's congestion pricing plan. So I can add material from the search, or I can add my own sources. So I can continue adding sources either at the beginning or throughout the development of this notebook or later on. And I can upload files. I can go to, add links to websites that have information. I can upload YouTube videos. I can add from my Google Drive. So I can continue building the notebook and improving the notebook. I can remove documents if I want to. Each document that's in here, by the way, has a summary. So if I don't remember what the document is, I can quickly read the summary and I can read the full text. And if I query something, so here's an example of a query. I typed in, what were some of the key concerns critics have had about congestion pricing in New York City? And it gives me an answer. And you'll see here the queries, the response has these little citations. So if I click on this, and they're talking about how New Jersey officials were concerned that there wasn't mitigation funding for impacted communities, like people who are commuting from New Jersey who would be impacted. So if I click that, it's going to show me in purple the specific part of this document where that answer is drawing from, right? So that's the part about grounding. It's showing me the citation of that material so I can go back and say, oh yeah, okay, this is where that issue of mitigation concerns was raised. And I can go back and verify that, validate that, explore it further, do more reporting, et cetera. And any of these queries I can then save as a note so I can return to those answers later. And I can ask more and more queries. This was a query I was asking about traffic and transit ridership and how that would be affected by the congestion pricing, et cetera. So this is the query panel, and this is where I can either use existing queries to see, what I've been learning, or I can create new queries at any time. And then over here is the studio panel. This is where it's creating the visuals, for example, or the explainers. So I want to show you a couple examples of those. Here's a report. So this is just a text report based on 40 sources about the environmental assessment and how that happened. So this is just a text summary, and it includes tables. And if I want to, I can click here and basically download that to or export that to Google Docs. It also has given me, here's the global comparison. So this actually is the table, the data table. Now, because of the way my screen is set up, it's kind of compacted. But what I can do is easily export to Google Sheets. So I just opened up a Google Sheet. Now, do you see that? So now it's exported as a Google Sheet, and I can basically start to see this comparison, right, of the different systems across the world where there's this congestion pricing. I still have to do a little bit of formatting. So I want to do the text wrapping so I can see it, read it more easily. And I can do other, alternating colors. So it's a little bit easier to read this. But right away, I've got a nice spreadsheet basically giving me some information about the different toll rates across these different cities, the way that these different cities congestion pricing plans impacted the congestion, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very quick way of kind of getting the data into a different format for more easy analysis. Going back to the notebook, other things in the studio, this one is a helpful one. This is a mind map. So we may want a visual of like what's in this notebook, right? So I'm interested in the impacts and the effects, the economic effects, the environmental effects. Let's look at the environmental effects. And there's actually a couple of different subtopics within that. And let's say I want to look at, okay, what is the CO2 impact? Like how much is this actually going to improve the air quality in New York City? So I can click that, and that's going to actually trigger a query. And so now it's going to point me back to the original documents and give me a summary of that kind of information. So the mind map can help me navigate what's actually in the notebook in a visual way, and it can also help point me back to the original material. Other things in this notebook include videos to help me understand, and then these infographics. And I would say if I had to pick one of the things that's most useful, I think the infographics are possibly the most useful because they're very hard to generate for me by myself, just drawing this on paper or using Illustrator. And it actually gives me a really good overview of complex material. And this is a good example, I think. It's a simple infographic that's basically portraying a pretty complicated process and system of congestion pricing in, I think, a pretty clear way. I'd be curious what people think about this. But I find this to be pretty helpful. You can share it directly from here, or you can download it and use it in whatever way you choose to. The slides are also pretty remarkably good in my experience. Most of the AI tools I've used to experiment with slide generation thus far have not been that great. They create kind of low quality slides in my experience, but this one actually is, I think, very good. Again, I'd be curious what you think when you look at these, but I think these are actually really good slides. You can also, again, direct the system to produce the slides in a way that works for you. So I typically want very few words, large images, strong typography, very visual slides that can be quickly digested. And it's pretty good at doing that. I like the papercraft style. That's a little side tip. I just personally like the way that style looks, or the sketchnote style, as I mentioned earlier. And again, you can direct it to focus on a specific subtopic, or to give me a comparison between these two cities in these slides for this purpose, for this kind of audience in this context, or just for yourself. Again, I want to understand this. Give me an explainer. Give me the 3 steps to this process, or whatever, and it can give you that. And now you can download that as either, if I click download it, I actually have the option of downloading those as a PDF, as a PowerPoint, or I think those are the main 2. Last thing I want to show you here as an example is the cinematic video. This is a new feature. So you can actually create a cinematic style video, which is different than the video overview I showed earlier. So I'll just give you a little sneak peek at that. And just want to make sure you can hear the audio, by the way. You hearing the audio? Not yet, but it should be coming.
For years,
can you hear the audio okay?
Held the title of the most congested urban area in the United States. Decades of economic growth had packed more and more vehicles into a finite, inflexible grid of streets. Between 2010 and 2019, travel speeds in Manhattan's central business district dropped by 22%. Traffic crawled along at an average of exactly 7.1 miles an hour. Sitting in that gridlock cost the average driver 102 hours of lost time every year, draining roughly $1,595 from their wallets. When the commercial center of a 28-county region grinds to a halt, it chokes off productivity and raises the cost of deliveries. The traffic gridlock acts as a direct tax on the regional economy. For millions of commuters, the MTA transit system is the only viable alternative to driving. But that sprawling network requires $15 billion in capital funding to modernize its aging signals and infrastructure. To solve both the gridlock and the funding vacuum at once, New York established America's first central business district tolling program. They drew a cordon across Manhattan, covering everything south of 60th Street. Any passenger vehicle crossing into that boundary during the day pays a daily fee of $9 to $15. Neighboring states, including New Jersey, quickly filed lawsuits.
Okay.
Opponents argued that drivers would simply bypass the Manhattan.
You get the idea. Yeah, I have friends who live on 57, 58th. The people who live right inside the cordon are not happy about that because they have to pay the tax just to come back home, each day. So that gives you a sense of the quality of the cinematic video. I find that pretty impressive. As an explanatory tool, it would take me hours to create something that wouldn't be as good quality-wise as that. I'm not saying it's going to replace, the top quality original video that news organizations create, but there may be a place for that as a mechanism for creating some forms of video that we guide, that we steer in the future. What are the source materials for the videos? Kathy's asking. So it's generating imagery. So it's using Nano Banana Pro, which is the funny name that Google gave to its visual image engine. It's using Veo, which is Google's video engine, and it's using those two in conjunction with kind of Gemini intelligence. And it's drawing on only the grounded materials in that notebook. So if you had different materials in that notebook, it would produce a different kind of material because there would be different, basis for that video script. And then it's using Google's voice engine for the voicing of it. So it's using a combination of kind of Google AI tools for those materials. So someone's mentioning a strict policy about AI. AI policies are evolving. They're being shaped in many newsrooms. It's an ongoing subject of discussion among many places. NotebookLM happens to be a tool that in some newsrooms they prefer to use rather than kind of open-ended AI systems that aren't grounded. And also you have a more secure, assuming again you're on the enterprise contract, you have a more strict guarantee of privacy and security on those enterprise contracts with Google than you have with, let's say, an OpenAI type of contract for ChatGPT. So in some cases, newsrooms are opting for use of tools like NotebookLM because of the grounding, because of the enterprise contracts, and because of the flexibility and ways of using it for journalistic, purposes. But each newsroom will obviously make its own decisions about how they're going to use it. For example, many may not use any of the studio elements except for, just internal exploration. And they'll mainly use it as a way just to find information, find internal information more easily and do some internal exploration to speed up the time to get to the documents to do the human analysis, for example. So that's certainly one way that newsrooms can use it without really creating too much conflict with other policies they may have. Let's take some time for questions now, and then I want to offer you a few minutes of hands-on time to experiment with something while I'm here to answer questions along the way. But let's take a few minutes now for questions. What's coming up on your mind? What are you curious about? What are you concerned about? What are you excited about? What's a use case you want to share with other folks here? Question about the web search. Some of the other LLMs seem to have a problem searching for recent news. How up to date is Notebook's news search? That's a great question. These are changing constantly. It's a moving target. I haven't done a lot of kind of searching where I'm asking for yesterday kind of news. And my use cases have more been around, like in the congestion pricing example I just showed, material that's, I would say, let's say 3 months and further back, and it's been pretty good for that. So reports from 2025 right now, for example, it's pretty good at gathering that. But but I'd encourage you to kind of just do quick experimentation and see where it's going to land. I think the great thing about these tools is that they don't require you to only use that tool, right? Like this tool for me is part of an ecosystem that you can create or your own workflow. So if I want to get really up-to-date stuff, I might use a whole range of other search tools and then just bring something into NotebookLM. So that you don't have to rely on its search if you're finding that its search is not bringing you, the up-to-date stuff you want. And you can also use it just for your own materials. Other questions? Since you may not have any visual materials in your document set, it can't be generative image only for using grounded materials. It has to be using training materials in the underlying model for art and visual generation. Yeah, that's interesting. Good point. Yeah. So for the studio creation, yeah, it's not, if you don't have any visual material in there, yeah, it's going to, in the case of the studio material, yeah, it's going to use its generative capabilities to generate new images if you don't have any images that you have in your existing data set. If you have images, it's actually going to put those into the material that it's generating, the video, for example. So one thing I've noted about the audio overviews, which is I think great, is that it does quote really effectively material in your notebook. And again, one thing I would advise as a tip is to give it really detailed prompts. So for example, I created a prompt for, I have my highlights stored in Readwise. So material I read online or Kindle books, I have the highlights from those materials stored online in Readwise, and I can export those as Google Docs. So I imported those into a NotebookLM, which is basically a collection of my reading highlights. And I asked it to give me a report targeted for me based on a couple particular interests I have. Give me a report about summarizing for me a couple of the things that I was interested in exploring. And it basically tailored that audio report like it was talking to me specifically. And you can do that with any subject and any material you have, is you can tailor what it's producing in the video or audio overview or the reports, the text reports, specifically for a question you're exploring or addressing, which is really powerful. It takes typically, by the way, anywhere from 15 seconds for it to generate something to a few minutes if it's generating a video. Actually, a video could be even 10 minutes. So just so you know that those aren't necessarily going to be instantaneous. I want to show you a couple of other examples of other notebooks, and then I want to invite you to kind of experiment for a few minutes while we take other questions. So the range of notebooks you can create is pretty broad. There's many different kinds of notebooks you can create. So I just want to illustrate a couple of other kinds of notebooks to give you some inspiration for your own use of NotebookLM, and so that you can use it in many different kinds of use cases. And so here again is my NotebookLM. This is my kind of overall collection. Here's another example. This is about solitary confinement for people with disabilities as a reporting topic. And you can see an infographic analysis of a particular prison reform effort, and where that's fallen short according to the documents that I've gathered here to look at this. So that's a specific reporting project. Here's a channel. This is a YouTube channel about productivity with AI. And this is the videos in that channel that I can learn from. Those are public videos, so they're available. Here's NotebookLM. This is a notebook about NotebookLM, right? So you can see a lot of different materials that I've thought about using. Okay, how can journalism educators use NotebookLM? Give me a data table. Here's a data table about how journalists can use NotebookLM based on these many different sources and documents that I've assembled and my own notes. And again, I can turn this into a spreadsheet, which I have a separate spreadsheet on. Yeah, and all sorts of other materials about this. So basically using NotebookLM to teach me more about NotebookLM based on sources about NotebookLM. Rise of independent creators, navigating the taste atlas. So that's my idea about gathering all the materials, your favorite books and music and highlights from material. Litigation about AI. So there's many different lawsuits going on. New York Times is suing OpenAI, et cetera. There are many other lawsuits going on related to AI and news organizations. I wanted to gather that, analyze that. So I created a notebook with that material. and created a data table about all the different lawsuits that are going on right now to have them at my fingertips and kind of remind myself of all those different lawsuits that are going on. What are some other examples? My own talks. So anytime I have a talk, if I have a transcript of that workshop, I can go back. And here's another tip. You can always use NotebookLM or any other AI tool for that matter to critique yourself. What haven't I been talking about? What issues have I left out? What are some ways in which I could use examples more effectively? What would a critic say is missing from this? What are the topics that I touched on but didn't explain in full, or I could expand upon? Or what are new visuals I could create that I haven't created? So that's another way of using it. Yeah, vibe coding. So learning a new topic. Harvard Business Review. I gathered the videos from the Harvard Business Review channel to do some learning. What are some other examples here? There's a project I worked on with a Connecticut newsroom about jury diversity. Here's an example of that, so sort of a smaller subset of that material, just to illustrate, okay, what are the issues that are happening in that state around jury diversity and some new legal challenges that are coming up. So all sorts of different kinds of use cases. Okay, a quick challenge for you, a hands-on opportunity with the few minutes we have left, and you can continue asking questions. Was the Perugia notebook shared more broadly? Yes, it was shared broadly to anyone in the public. In fact, I included a link in the post I just wrote. If you look at the newest post I wrote at the top of Wonder Tools, you'll see I included a link to that public notebook in that piece. So yeah, that's an example of a way of sharing publicly. By the way, again, to reiterate, if I didn't mention this, or to say this, if I didn't mention it, you can share a notebook with just a colleague or a team, right? So you can have it private share, just like you'd share a Google Doc or a Google Sheet with a team. You can also do that. So you have a collaborative notebook. Yeah, so the quick challenge is create a new notebook and put in a query. So you can gather, either if you have a document on hand, you want to use an existing document, feel free to use that. But if you haven't tried the deep research, try the deep research and give it a query. Here's an example of a query. I'll put it in the chat. And this is not related to a news topic. So you can definitely pick whatever you want, pick a different, more newsworthy topic, but maybe it could be a news topic if you're arts and culture journalist and there's an anniversary of Mahler coming up. So then basically you can give that research topic to NotebookLM to deep research. And again, feel free to use whatever you want. It doesn't have to be a long query. You can do a relatively short query. It could be something as simple as like, air pollution in city X, and it will start to find sources. One thing that's interesting about this is you're not obliged to add these sources. So it's kind of going to give me some sources, but I can pick and choose. I can preview those sources and use those to populate the notebook or not. Once it's going to take maybe 60 seconds to populate that, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And once I have those sources in there, I can start to look at those sources, add them into my notebook. Again, if you prefer, just put in one source that's on your computer. You don't have to have a separate external search. I just wanted to illustrate this and show you the time that it might take. And I chose a deep research. You can also choose fast research if you want to get going more quickly. And that might have been a more quick. Let me actually show you the difference. So now I'm going to do a fast research version of that, and we'll see how much quicker it actually is. So it's going to do a much more quick search, more of like a Google, a standard Google quick search. And the next thing you can do is so it's giving me these sources. For time's sake, I'm not going to actually go in detail and look at each of these. I'm going to import them. I can now go back and look at them, and you can sort of start to judge the kinds of sources it's giving you. One other tip is in your prompt, you can actually specify certain kinds of sources. So you can ask it to use academic sources or peer-reviewed reports or government material, or you can sort of specify certain kinds of things you want. So it's given me these bunch of resources, and now I can start querying. And again, I could query just an individual document. So what I want you to do is just to take that document or initial document and experiment with a quick query, and then pick one of these. these studio things to create. One tip on the studio creations, if you click, this is not evident in the user interface. If you just click the button, like if I just click report, actually, what's a better example? If I just click a quiz, it's just going to generate a quiz. But if I click on the button, the little arrow, it's going to allow me to customize that. So I can choose whether I want a standard quiz, an easy quiz, a hard quiz. So in general, you want to customize these. The mind map cannot be customized, but all the others can be customized. So you click infographic, for example, with the button, with the arrow, and then you can choose the type of infographic style you want. You can choose whether you want landscape, portrait, or square. You can choose a language, and then you can choose detailed, standard, or concise. Concise will be simpler and clearer, and then you can give it a detailed prompt. Now, in my NotebookLM piece, the article I wrote about NotebookLM, there's a link to a Kickstarter, basically a guide that I created, a little tool that I created to help you create a new notebook more efficiently, more easily. So that is in the handout to this session. So as we get ready to wrap here, let me give you the link to the handout for today's session. And this has the links that I've referenced and some other resources. And let me show you what's in here. So if you click on that link, this is what you're seeing on screen. There's some background on my overview that I gave, some basic information about the 3 panels, a couple of use case examples, my guide, the NotebookLM, which has a video and a summary, and some links. And then here's the YouTube to NotebookLM exporter that I mentioned. And here's the Kickstarter. So actually, I'll paste this in the chat as well. If you want to continue on after this live session today and make your own notebook, I'm going to copy the link URL, put it in the chat here. This is intended to help you kickstart your own notebooks. So what that means is you just put in a topic. So, and it's going to basically give you prompts to use for all of the different elements of NotebookLM. So to create a slide deck, to create a video overview. And let's say I'm reporting on investigative reporter, and I'm reporting on, someone give me a topic if you want. You have a quick topic. Let's say we're looking at water pollution in Boston, where I'm from, where the river used to be. A total mess. I'm not going to do a long one here. I'm just going to do and how it's changed over time. This was a big problem when I was growing up. So I can generate a plan. And this is basically vibe coded with Claude artifacts. So super easy to make this kind of little tool with Claude artifacts. And now it's actually giving me a personalized plan. As it says here, it'll take about 10, 15 seconds. And then I can just download that and I can start using those prompts or build on those prompts. So if you are finding yourself facing like the cold start problem and like NotebookLM is like, what do I put in here? You can actually use this and it will give you a lot of detailed prompts that are designed to work really well in NotebookLM, and you can customize them and you can use this as often as you want. So you can see here all these different prompts for infographics or for slide decks or a report or video overview, and even a fast research query. So this is a much more detailed query than the one that I used, which was just like, hey, water pollution in Boston. And so I can just basically copy this and paste that into NotebookLM. Does that make sense? It's also giving me a suggestion about some other materials. These are all materials, Boston Globe reporting about water pollution, WBUR, material. So I might have these materials or I can find them somewhere else. It gives me some ideas about how I can use this notebook. And now I can download this to basically have as I'm building my notebook. So this is a supplement to NotebookLM that I created just to help you basically and other people to make more effective use of NotebookLM. And now we are basically approaching our end time. How secure and private is the app versus the desktop version? So basically NotebookLM at this point is I'm only using it on the web version. There's no separate downloadable app version at this point. It's basically just a web app, as it were. Google did make a Gemini downloadable app recently, and so you may see a separate NotebookLM app at some point, but right now it's just a web app. I hope that answers your question, Kim. Yeah, making more specific prompts, more detailed prompts, giving you a sense of what kinds of prompts might be good for different aspects of the studio panel, for example. Yeah, that's the purpose of the little Kickstarter tool. And using other AI to create prompts for NotebookLM to prevent false negatives. Yeah, that's a great tactic. If we go back to the handout, by the way, you'll see in the handout, in addition to the stuff I showed you so far, there's a few other NotebookLM plugins that you might find of interest, like Cortex, that just add a couple of features. There's some query templates. So these are things you can query if you want to gather information from the query tab. There's some just ideas about things you could do. For example, I mentioned about challenging yourself or kind of challenging the documents that you have. You can use these kind of queries as templates for ways of doing that within NotebookLM. And then some of the prompts that I mentioned also for challenging your own thinking. And then I included here some supplemental tools. So I never see one tool as the end all be all for everything. I'm using other tools, for example, for recording meetings or gathering material in other contexts. And then I can put those into NotebookLM. So here's some other tools that I find particularly useful for that kind of purpose. And then some fully private and secure AI tools that are alternatives to NotebookLM, tools like Jan.ai, Anything LLM, Misty is another one. These are all tools you can use offline or just locally on your own laptop if you do not want to use anything that's sending to anyone's server. I included a couple further reading books, link to my newsletter, my email if you want to follow up on anything, or if you want to collaborate on something in some way, or if I can be of help in some way. I think that's it. I think we're out of time. If there are final questions, feel free to ask them now. Now is a good time to ask any final questions or share any final bits and pieces that you want to mention. But thank you for being here, for showing interest and for being here and for exploring and experimenting. I'm super excited about NotebookLM. I think this is a way for us to do our work more efficiently and sometimes more effectively and thoughtfully and ethically and constructively and playfully. And so for me, it's just an exciting new part of the journalist toolkit. So I hope you also can find some value and utility in it, and would love to see how you're using it and what you find most useful and less useful. So feel free to be in touch about any of that. Elizabeth, I'll turn to you in case you have any final words or want to wrap up in any way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here today. And thanks everyone for coming and joining this session today. Yeah, I'll make sure to share the recording of this session in that email, and I'll also share this link. So if you lose this link to this handout, no worries. That will be in the email that I send out as well. And then if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send those to me, and I can also, send those over to Jeremy as well. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here. And we can, if there's interest in having another session, maybe we can talk to Jeremy about doing a Notebook LM part 2.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.